Hi, my name is Frank Blankenship. I am a psychiatric survivor. I come to you today to talk about anti-psychiatry. I remember attending a conference sometime in the mid-1970s, an international conference on human rights and psychiatric oppression. There was also a woman at this conference, and she didn't like the word anti-psychiatry. The reason she gave for not liking the word anti-psychiatry was that a psychiatrist had come up with it. A psychiatrist had coined it. A psychiatrist may indeed have coined the word anti-psychiatry, but of course psychiatry has no monopoly on the English language, nor has psychiatry a deed on the word anti-psychiatry, so that anybody can use it in any way they see fit, and people outside of the psychiatric profession, in fact, people outside of the mental health profession, probably have more of a right to the word anti-psychiatry than those within it. I felt differently. I disagreed with this woman in the sense that I was at the time familiar with the works of R.D. Laing, Ronald David Laing, a Scottish psychiatrist in the UK, a founding member of the Philadelphia Association, and the experimental therapeutic communities, residences, that he founded, of which the most famous or infamous, if you like, was Kingsley Hall. At Kingsley Hall, the distinction between patient and staff was not emphasized. It was a more unstructured environment. There were not a lot of rules there. Loren Mosher, a student of R.D. Laing, created his own similar house that was operational for a few years during the 1970s in the Bay Area on the West Coast. At present, there are Soterior houses operational now in different parts of the world, and this is part of the legacy of R.D. Laing and what he did. My feeling was that I'd much prefer to reside in a place like Kingsley Hall than undergo a mental health hearing and have myself committed to a psychiatric facility, perhaps a state hospital, involuntarily. Anti-psychiatry, the word in its modern usage was coined sometime around 1966 by David Cooper. In 1967, David Cooper authored this book, Psychiatry and Anti-Psychiatry, distinguishing in it his own approach from that of conventional biomedical psychiatry. David Cooper was a colleague of Artie Lang. In 2009, Thomas Szasz, someone who has been associated with the word anti-psychiatry, but who has gone to great lengths who had gone to great lengths to separate himself from anti-psychiatry, authored this book. Anti-Psychiatry Quackery Squared. Thomas Szasz had issues with many of the people that were the leaders of the anti-psychiatry movement on the European continent, because many of them were left-leaning, communists or socialist. And Szasz apparently felt that despite being one of the most thoroughgoing critics of psychiatry around, that communism was a bigger threat to freedom than psychiatry. He also saw something of collectivization in the social experiment by Artie Lang at Kingsley Hall. Now, anti-psychiatry, anti-psychiatry, the word, is neither left nor right. There are left liberals that are anti-psychiatry, and there are right-wing Republicans that are anti-psychiatry. People of all perspectives and all makes can be anti-psychiatry if they so choose. Now, one thing, Thomas Szasz in Anti-Psychiatry Quackery Squared accuses David Cooper of never adequately defining the term anti-psychiatry. And I think if we look at that term closely, we can pretty easily remedy this deficit and come up with a standing definition. But first, let's do a search on the internet using a search engine and see what kind of definitions we come up with. Well, I did that, and about the only definition for anti-psychiatry I found at dictionary.com, and I think it belongs to the Collins Dictionary, is this one. And you don't need to dwell too much on that. I'll read it right now. Anti-psychiatry. Noun. 1. An approach to mental disorders that makes use of concepts derived from existentialism, psychoanalysis, and sociological theory. Now, my feeling was that definition somewhat misses the point, misses the mark, and it falls short of really saying what anti-psychiatry means. And so let's look a little deeper into this. If you were to look at an encyclopedia, they might have a section on the subject, and on the internet we have Wikipedia. Usually in about the first paragraph, they define the term that they are dealing with. And the case is true of anti-psychiatry. So let's look a little bit at what Wikipedia says about anti-psychiatry. Anti-psychiatry is the view that psychiatric treatments are often more damaging than helpful to patients, and a movement opposing such treatments for almost 2 centuries. It considers psychiatry a coercive instrument of oppression due to an unequal power relationship between doctor and patient, and a highly subjective diagnostic process. Okay, that's anti-psychiatry from Wikipedia, and maybe that's more than we ask for starters. So let's throw out the second sentence of that paragraph and let's look at the first sentence. Anti-psychiatry is the view that psychiatric treatments are often more damaging than helpful to patients, and a movement opposing such treatments for almost 2 centuries. Problem. Anti-psychiatry, the word has not been around for 2 centuries. So let's throw out the last half of that first sentence, and we've got something like this. Anti-psychiatry is the view that psychiatric treatments are often more damaging than helpful to patients. Now, if you are certainly a person does not want to be harmed by a doctor, and sometimes, it happens more than you would think. Just look up the word iatrogenic and see where that leads you sometime. But we're on the word anti-psychiatry, and although this does offer one something of a definition, I think we could get even closer if we look at the component parts of the word anti-psychiatry. You see, anti-psychiatry, and the first component part of that is the prefix. The prefix is anti. You can go to a search engine, put anti in the box and definition and see what you come up with, and what you're likely to find is something like this. And this is from dictionary.com. And I will read it, so you don't have to dwell on this. Anti, prefix. 1, against, opposing, anti-clerical, anti-social. 2, opposite to, anti-climax, anti-mirror. 3, rival, false, antipope. And I'm going with the first definition there, which is against or in opposition to, because I think that is what we mean when we say anti-psychiatry, that we are against or opposed to psychiatry. So the next question becomes, what exactly do we mean by psychiatry? What is psychiatry? Excuse me. And if you look in the search engine, if you go to dictionary.com or any other site, dictionary on the internet, you're likely to find something like perhaps like this. This is the first definition I found, and I thought it was kind of off the mark. It was kind of inadequate. I didn't think a psychiatrist is likely to care for it that much. It says, psychiatry, noun, 1, the practice or science of diagnosing and treating mental disorders. I think that's kind of limited, so if we look again, and I think they have multiple definitions at dictionary.com, so I go down, the next one seems a little closer. So here's the next definition that I found there, and it reads like this. Psychiatry, noun, 1, the branch of medicine that deals with the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of mental and emotional disorders. All right. Now if we add our prefix to our word, what do we have? And the definition that I came up with is something like this. Anti-psychiatry, noun, 1, against the branch of medical science that deals with the study, diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of mental and emotional disorders. Well, that might lead to some further questions, such as, why would anybody be against psychiatry? So I came up with a list of my own, some points about why a person might oppose, be against psychiatry. And I'm going to read this list of 7 points. Why anti-psychiatry? One, psychiatry is based upon intolerance and suppression of human difference. Psychiatry tends to be inconducive to change and for the status quo. It's not likely to help with a person's social mobility. 2, as long as treatment is non-consensual and coercive, its patients are prisoners and its hospitals are prisons. No other branch of what purports to be medicine takes prisoners. 3, psychiatry is biased and its findings are spurious. 4, psychiatry is more damaging than helpful, more injurious than healing, more destructive than beneficial. All physical treatments involve harming the patient. And talk therapy, more often than not, achieves absolutely nothing. 5, psychiatry is pseudoscience. No mental illness has, in fact, ever been found to be a real physical disease. The biological basis for mental disorder diagnoses, if you look, is very elusive. These experts can't seem to find it, no matter how hard they look. 6, the treatments are ineffective. The numbers of people described as mentally ill have been rising. They've been rising for years. They've been rising since about the time that they first locked up people for lunacy. Psychiatry has been an abject failure at healing people of their presumed disorders. 7. Psychiatric treatment destroys the health of physically healthy specimens of humanity. Psychiatry kills. Humanity would be better off without it. So there are some of the reasons why a person might be against, in opposition to, the practice of psychiatry. Thank you.